أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. We're going to pick up with the legendary military ideology of the Prophet ﷺ, the era of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is video number 9. And the last example was from 2.2.1. Again, picking up from page number 359. This is an eloquent example of putting oneself above all fleeting luxuries of this world. In other words, what happened again was that he was told, Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib was told that the treasury is full of gold and silver, and he gave it all away, and he also cleaned the treasury, and he also made 2 rakas in there. So getting back with the story, the Muslim treasury was filled with gold and silver, but Amir al-Mu'mineen did not look at it with admiration and pride. Rather, his response when the official told him about that was to say, Allahu Akbar. Although some people venerate worldly accumulation and think of wealth of being great, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is greater than that and greater than all things. As long as the Muslim truly feels that Allah is greater, why should he make his heart submit to anything else? This shows deep understanding on part of Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, as he remembered the insignificance of this world and the magnified Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, saying, Allahu Akbar. This is an implicit rebuke to the one who is deceived by temporary worldly accumulations and forgets that Jalla Jalaluhu is greater than all that exists. This is indeed a very accurate evaluation that is felt by the believer who is enlightened by Allah. The more he recognizes in his heart that Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is greater than all things, the more these worldly matters and everything that has to do with them will become insignificant, and he will begin to use halal wealth to obey Jalla Jalaluhu. On the other hand, if worldly gain becomes more significant in his heart, it will be at the expense of his regarding Allah Jalla Jalaluhu's greatness. We see Amirul Mu'mineen soaring to heights of greatness when addressing worldly gains by saying, "O yellow, O white, tempt someone other than me." This is indicative of a lively situation, consciousness, and sensitive feelings that regard this world as an enemy that is trying to cheat and deceive its opponent. Thus he announced his victory over all the inclinations of self-interest and emotions. He showed that he was using reason to make a proper evaluation of worldly accumulations, because all times of pleasures or of hardships are transient, and to make a proper evaluation of the hereafter, because it is eternal and has both great blessings and terror of its punishment in hellfire. He radiallahu ta'ala anhu reached the pinnacle when he prayed 2 rak'ahs in the public treasury, so that they would be witnesses for him on the day of resurrection, testifying that he was just in his ruling, and that he was just in his ruling, and that he adhered to the straight path. Perhaps his taking the treasury as a place of prayer symbolized the superiority of the hereafter over this world, and the perfect sublime conduct he followed when disposing of this wealth in legitimate ways. 2.2.2 By Allah, I do not take anything from your wealth. Another example of Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu's asceticism was narrated by Harun ibn Antarah from his father, who said, I entered upon Ali ibn Abi Talib in Khurnaqa, a place in Kufa, and found him shivering beneath an old worn out clock. I said, O Amirul Mu'mineen, Allah has allocated to you and your family a share of this wealth, and you are doing this to yourself. He said, by Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, I do not take anything from your wealth. Rather, this is my old clock that I came out from my house with, or he said from Medina. We may wonder what made Amirul Mu'mineen, Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, live the life of the poor and put up with the bitter cold when he was able to buy the best and warmest of clothes on earth. This is an example of true asceticism, as he shunned worldly conveniences even though he was able to afford them. He was a student of the prophetic school in which he was raised, with no interest in the fleeting conveniences of this world. Instead, he had a spirit of comparing or competing for the eternal blessings of the hereafter. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam lived the life of the poor even though he could have been like the best of the rich. 2.2.3 I am happy with what he sold me, and he was happy with what he took. It was narrated by Abu Mata ibn Abdullah al-Juhani said, I saw Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu wearing a lower garment and upper garment and carrying a stick as if he were a Bedouin in the desert. Then he mentioned him entering the marketplace and bargaining with one of the merchants over a garment for 3 dirhams. The merchant recognized him, whereupon Ali radiallahu anhu decided not to buy anything from him. He went to another merchant, and when that one recognized him too, he did not buy anything from him either. Then he went to a young lady and brought a shirt from, he went to a young lad, not a lady, but a lad, and brought a shirt from him for 3 dirham. The boy's father came, and the boy told him what had happened. His father took 1 dirham, went to Sayyidina Ali and said, this dirham, O Amirul Mu'mineen. Ali radiallahu anhu said, what about this dirham? He said, the price of the shirt was 2 dirhams. He said, I am happy with what he sold me, and he is happy with what he took. This is an example of the asceticism of Amirul Mu'mineen, Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu ta'ala anhu. His outward appearance gave the impression that he was a Bedouin man because his clothing was scuffy. When he bought clothes for himself, he chose the humble kind that were cheap in price, even though at that time he was the highest official in the world, as he was the Khalif of the Muslim Ummah. This is indicative of his humility and lack of interest in worldly goods, even though he had his share of the fay, the treasury, and other sources of state income that were available to those like him who worked full-time taking care of the Muslim interest. He still did not take it. Another example of his piety and cautious approach, which was aimed at being above suspicion lest he falls short in sin, is reflected in his refusal to buy from those who recognize him. They might have given him a lower price because of his status, and he did not want to take advantage of this high position for personal gain. This shows a precise understanding of the concepts of piety and awareness of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, because the position of Khalifat for him and others like him was a righteous deed. The Khalif, if he is just, is the first of the 7 whom Allah Jalla Jalaluhu will shade with his shade on the day of resurrection. He did not want to sully this righteous deed with worldly interests, thus changing the good deed into a cause of punishment instead of a reward. This sublime conduct set a good example for those who came after him. 2.2.4 It is more humbling to the heart and an example for the believer to follow. Umar ibn Qais said, it was said to Ali radiallahu anhu, Why do you patch your shirt? He said, it is more humbling to the heart and an example for the believer to follow. This is an example of his asceticism and his eagerness to train Muslimin to live a life of self-denial and simplicity. He noted two things about wearing patched clothes. First, it is a means of making the heart and soul humble and keeping away from the causes of self-admiration and pride. Secondly, he regarded that as an example to the Muslims. If the people saw him wearing patched clothes when he was occupying the highest position, their hearts would become humble and they would avoid competing with each other to buy expensive clothes. This would also lend support to and raise the morale of ascetics whom people always criticize for their simple way of life, or ascetics. Ascetics, I think, would be the appropriate. 2.2.5, nothing of the wealth of Allah is permissible for the Caliph except two plates. It was narrated that Abdullah ibn Zurair al-Ghafiqi said, I entered upon Ali ibn Abi Talib and he offered us some pieces of meat cooked in water and sprinkled with flour. I said, may Allah Jalla Jalaluhu guide you. Why didn't you offer us some of this duck? For Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has blessed us a great deal. He said, O son of Zurair, I heard the Messenger of Allah say, nothing of the wealth of Allah is permissible for the Caliph except two plates, a plate from which he and his family eat and a plate which he offers the people. Here we see Amirul Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu setting a sublime example of piety and asceticism with regard to worldly luxuries of food and drink. He could have taken whatever he wanted from the treasury without anyone noticing, in order to live at the same level as the richest of Muslimin, but he was content with a hard life, preferring the hereafter to this world, preferring to be on the safe side with regard to his religious commitment. He sought to set a good example, because if the highest man in the state lived like this, then that would be a consolation to the poor. Consolation. So that's the American accent, consolation. To the poor, encouraging them to be patient and accept the decree of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. Conversely, it would be an exhortation to the rich to be grateful to Allah Jalla Jalaluhu and to reduce their indulgence in extravagance and luxuries. Inshallah, we're going to stop here at the bottom of page number 363. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسم ربك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون. سلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.